The shot rang out in the night. A frail old man, his hands scarred from wars long past, stepped in front of a trembling teenage girl. When he fell, silence swallowed the street. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. But by morning, thunder rolled from 100 engines. Before we start today's story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. The town of Millhaven was small, the kind of place where everyone nodded at stop signs, but few truly knew one another. On the edge of Main Street stood a diner, walls yellowed with years of cigarette smoke. Every Friday night, bikers gathered there, black, leather, loud laughter, the smell of engines that never seemed to sleep. Among them was 17-year-old Emily Warren, daughter of a man who once rode but lost his way. She carried his restless spirit in her eyes, though her mother prayed it would never burn too wild. Emily's life was ordinary by day. Schoolbooks, lockers, whispers in hallways, but every evening she stopped at that diner to dream of roads she had never traveled. Her mother worried, the town judged. Yet behind the counter, an old veteran named Samuel Callahan watched her with the quiet patience of a man who had seen more battles than he ever spoke of. Samuel was 72, with a crooked spine and a limp that marked each step like a period in a long sentence. People knew him as the man who swept the diner floor, fixed broken stools, and poured black coffee that tasted of smoke. Few remembered the medals tucked away in a shoebox under his bed. Even fewer knew the loneliness that lingered in his tiny apartment above the laundromat. Samuel had once carried a rifle through jungles, carried brothers on his back, carried the weight of survival when others didn't make it home. Now he carried silence. Emily was one of the few who noticed him, not out of pity but because he listened. When her friends mocked her for being the biker's kid, Samuel never judged. His gaze said, "I know what it means to be misunderstood." Sometimes she lingered after closing, tracing circles on the counter with her finger, while Samuel mopped the floor. He'd tell her, "Kid, storms pass, even the heavy ones." She believed him, even when she didn't believe herself. Emily's father, Danny Warren, had once been a name people either cursed or revered. He rode with the Iron Legion MC, a group that lived somewhere between brotherhood and trouble. When Emily was 9, Danny disappeared. Prison rumors, whispered bar fights. No one ever told her the truth. Her mother called it a blessing. Emily called it a hole. That hole deepened when classmates laughed about her biker blood. Teachers avoided her eyes. Boys mocked her leather Samuelette when she wore it to school. She laughed it off, but Samuel saw the tremble in her hands. Prom season was approaching, and every hallway echoed with girls trying on crowns of glitter, boys rehearsing invitations. Emily wanted to go, more than she admitted, but she had no dress, no date, no welcome. Samuel noticed the longing in her, silence, the way she paused when others spoke of gowns and corsages. He didn't speak of it, but in the quiet he understood. War had taught him the ache of wanting to belong somewhere you never quite fit. One Friday evening, as dusk turned the diner windows gold, Emily walked in alone. The bikers had gathered, tattoos, leather, the sound of boots echoing. Among them was Rick Bear Henson, a man with a voice like gravel and a loyalty as hard as steel. He noticed Emily sitting apart, her shoulders tense. She had grown up, around engines, yet still felt like a guest at her own table. Bear had known Danny Warren, her father, once upon a time. He saw the shadow of him in Emily's jawline, in her restless glances. "Kid," he said, sliding her a soda, "you're family whether you know it or not." She smiled, but doubt lingered. Outside, a storm gathered, the kind not seen in weather forecasts. For weeks, a gang from a neighboring town had been stirring trouble. Rumors said they were looking for easy targets, picking fights where none belonged. That night, as Emily left the diner, shadows followed. Samuel, closing the blinds, caught sight of figures moving across the street. His chest tightened with a soldier's instinct he thought had died long ago. The street was quiet, except for the echo of Emily's boots on the pavement. She felt it first, the sense of being watched. Then came the footsteps behind her, uneven, deliberate. "Hey, bikers girl," a voice sneered. She turned, heart racing. 3 men leaned against a rusted car, their smiles sharp with malice. She clutched her bag tighter. "Not looking for trouble," she muttered, quickening her pace, but trouble had already found her. The leader, a man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "Heard your daddy ran off. Guess you don't got anyone watching your back now." Emily's throat tightened. Fear clawed at her chest. From the diner window, Samuel's hand froze on the curtain rope. His legs, stiff with age, moved before his mind could argue. He pushed open the door, the bell chiming, and stepped into the night. The men didn't see him yet. His limp slowed him, but his resolve carried him forward. Emily's wide eyes caught. His movement a mix of hope and dread. "Leave the girl," Samuel's voice rang out, steadier than his bones. The men turned, laughter dripping from their lips. "Look what we've got. Grandpa thinks he's a hero." Samuel didn't flinch. He had faced gun barrels, jungles, and death before. This was nothing new except the girl trembling behind him. Emily whispered, "Samuel, please." He raised a hand, not to silence her, but to shield her. The scarred man pulled something from his Samuelette. A gun glinted under the streetlight. Emily's breath caught. Samuel's heartbeat slowed, every second stretching. He had been here before, enemy lines, hopeless odds. The soldier in him rose. "If you want her," he said quietly, "you go through me." The world paused, then cracked. The gun fired. Pain tore through Samuel's chest, yet he stayed standing long enough to push Emily behind him. She screamed his name as he crumpled. His hand still outstretched like a shield. Tires screeched in the distance, engines roaring closer. The shadows fled as headlights split the night. The engines thundered like a storm ripping across the horizon. Chrome flashed beneath street lamps as a dozen bikers swarmed onto Main Street, led by Bear Henson. Tires squealed, leather vests gleamed, and every eye locked on the scene. Emily kneeling beside Samuel, her hands shaking as she pressed against his wound. The gang melted into shadows, outnumbered and outmatched. Bear jumped from his bike, rage flickering across his face. "Who touched her?" he roared. Emily's lips quivered, unable to speak. Samuel's eyes fluttered. Don't let her see me go," he whispered hoarsely. Bear crouched low, gripping Emily's shoulders. "He's not going anywhere, kid. We've got him." Engines idled like restless lions, their rumble a warning to the night. As headlights swept across broken pavement, the town of Millhaven awoke to something it hadn't seen in years, a brotherhood standing like a wall. Emily clung to Samuel's hand, her tears dripping onto his sleeve, and for the first time she realized the quiet man had always been her protector. The hospital smelled of bleach and buzzing machines. Emily sat in the waiting room, her prom, flyer crumpled in her pocket. Her mother arrived in a rush, breathless and pale, wrapping her in trembling arms. Nurses whispered of Samuel Callahan, the old veteran who had stopped a bullet. Emily couldn't erase the image, his body falling, his hand still shielding her. Hours dragged like years until finally, Bear and the bikers filled the waiting area. Rough men with weathered faces, some still wearing their leather vests. People stared, but no one dared to speak against them. Bear approached Emily softly, like a father would. "He's in surgery, he's a fighter, same one who carried your daddy out of a bar fight once, years ago." Emily's eyes widened. She had never heard that story. "You knew my father," she whispered. Bear nodded. Samuel knew him better. Samuel saved more lives than he ever admitted. Emily realized that Samuel's silence had been full of secrets, not shame but sacrifice. Morning light filtered through blinds, painting pale stripes across Emily's exhausted face. Samuel survived the night, though barely. Tubes ran across his arms, machines keeping rhythm with his breath. Emily sat beside him, her hands folded around his weathered fingers. His eyelids flickered open. "You should be at prom," he rasped. Emily shook her head. "Not without you." He tried to smile, but pain bent his expression. "Don't waste your life waiting on old men, kid. Dance when the music plays." Tears welled in her eyes. The hallway buzzed, more bikers arriving, more leather filling the sterile white space. A nurse muttered under her breath, "Feels like the army rolled in." Emily stood, overwhelmed by the sight of so many strangers who suddenly felt like family. One biker, Snake, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You ain't alone. Not anymore." Samuel's chest rose shallowly, but his eyes burned steady. He had spent a lifetime guarding shadows. Now, in his final chapter, he saw light in the girl he had protected. News spread faster than wildfire. "Old vet takes bullet for biker's daughter," ran across the local paper. Some townsfolk called him reckless. Others called him a hero. But to Emily, Samuel was simply Samuel, the man who had been there when no one else stayed. That week, Emily sat through classes in silence. Whispers filled the hallways. Girls who once mocked her glanced at her differently. Boys who never noticed her now stared too long. She hated it. Prom posters clung to lockers, mocking her with glitter and smiles. She had no date, no dress, no heart for it. Yet Bear had other plans. One evening, he and the bikers crowded her front porch, engines cooling at the curb. Her mother answered the door, startled. Bear tipped his head. "We know prom's tomorrow. That kid deserves her night, and Samuel deserves to see her shine." Emily froze, her heart caught between disbelief and gratitude. The bikers exchanged nods. They weren't asking permission. They were making a promise. The day of prom arrived with skies clear as glass. Emily stared at the dress her mother had saved for years, hidden in the back of a cedar chest. It wasn't new, lace faded, hem slightly frayed, but it held love, stitched into every seam. Her mother helped her slip into it, fastening the zipper with trembling hands. Emily caught her reflection and barely recognized herself. For once she didn't look like the biker's girl. She looked like every dream she thought she'd lost. Outside, engines began to rumble, one after another, until the ground itself seemed to shake. Emily stepped onto the porch, her breath stolen. Lined across the street were over 100 motorcycles, chrome shining in the afternoon sun. Bear sat at the front, his leather vest patched with years of stories. "Your carriage awaits," he said with a grin. Neighbors peeked through curtains, mouths agape. Emily's mother pressed a hand to her lips, tears falling. Emily whispered, "For Samuel," and the engines roared like thunder answering her vow. Engines thundered in perfect rhythm, echoing off storefronts and cracked sidewalks as the convoy rolled through Millhaven. Emily sat on the back of Bear's Harley, her dress rippling like a flag in the wind. 100 bikes lined the road, Hell's Angels, Legion riders, independents who had heard the call. Drivers pulled to the side, headlights flashing in stunned silence. Parents stood on porches, children waved wide-eyed. Some townsfolk frowned, muttering about troublemakers, but the sight was too powerful to deny. A girl in lace, escorted by an army of leather, chrome, and loyalty, that was something no rumor could soil. At every stoplight, bikers raised 2 fingers in salute, shielding Emily like knights guarding their queen. She held her head higher than she ever had before, her heart pounding not with fear, but belonging. Bear leaned back just enough to be heard over the roar. "Kid, this ain't about the dance, it's about showing the world you got family." Emily's eyes blurred with tears, not from sadness, but from finally being seen. The school gymnasium glowed with string lights and balloon arches, music thumping through the night. Teenagers in tuxedos and gowns clustered near the doors, their laughter faltering as the first rumble shook the parking lot. Teachers exchanged nervous glances, and then, like a tidal wave, they arrived, row after row of motorcycles filling the lot, headlights cutting across the asphalt. Emily stepped down, her shoes clicking softly on the pavement, 100 leather-clad guardians standing behind her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The same boys who once mocked her now stood silent, the same girls who sneered at her. Samuelette stared wide-eyed. Emily's dress shimmered beneath the lights, but it was the strength in her posture that left everyone breathless. Bear gave her a nod. "Go on, kid. Show 'em who you are." The gym doors opened. Music faltered as Emily entered, her chin lifted, the entire room bending under the weight of her presence. For the first time, she wasn't the biker's daughter. She was simply Emily walking into her own story. Inside, whispers followed her like shadows. But instead of shrinking, Emily walked steady, each step echoing Samuel's words. "Dance," when the music plays. Her classmates parted like water, unsure whether to sneer or applaud. Then something unexpected. One boy, Jason Miller, the quarterback who once teased her relentlessly, stepped forward. His voice shook as he said, "You look amazing, Emily." She met his eyes not with longing but with calm strength. "I always did, you just never noticed." A hush fell, and for the first time the power shifted. Emily wasn't invisible anymore. The DJ hesitated, then turned the volume back up. Music swelled. A girl in sequins clapped, then another followed, until applause broke across the room. Emily felt her chest loosen, laughter rising unbidden. On the dance floor she spun alone at first, then surrounded by friends who had once been strangers. Outside, bikers leaned on handlebars, listening to the muffled beat. Bear crossed his arms, a smile tugging his scarred face. Inside, a girl who had carried shame now carried the entire room. Meanwhile, across town, Samuel Callahan lay in a hospital bed, machines ticking in measured rhythm. His chest rose with effort, every breath a small victory. A nurse entered with cautious steps. "They say the whole town's talking about you," she whispered, adjusting his blanket. Samuel chuckled faintly, though pain shadowed his eyes. "Not me, the girl." He closed his eyes, imagining Emily's laughter, her strength. In his mind, he could almost hear the roar of engines carrying her to something brighter. Memories of combat flickered, faces of brothers lost, the sound of gunfire, the guilt of survival. But tonight, for once, that guilt eased. He had given something that mattered, protected a life still burning with possibility. His breathing steadied. "Prom night," he murmured, voice fading. "She deserves every bit of it." Outside his window, faint in the distance, the low growl of motorcycles carried through the night air, like thunder rolling just for him. Samuel smiled, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself peace. Back at the gym, the night unfolded like a film. Emily laughed freely, spinning in the glow of string lights, her hair catching sparks of gold. For once, she didn't care about whispers, stares, or labels. She cared about the moment, the music, the laughter, the family waiting outside on engines that never let her fall. When the final slow song played, Emily stepped aside, standing at the edge of the floor. She lifted her eyes as if speaking to someone unseen. "This is for you, Samuel." The weight of his sacrifice pressed against her heart, but not as a wound, rather as a shield she would carry forever. Outside, bikers revved their engines in unison. the sound rising like a prayer offered to the night. Inside, Emily closed her eyes, swaying to the rhythm of both music and thunder. She wasn't alone anymore, she never would be. And somewhere, in a hospital bed miles away, an old veteran's heart kept time with hers. Morning light crept into the hospital room, soft and pale. Samuel's breathing had grown fragile, like a flame flickering against the wind. Emily burst through the door, still wearing her prom dress, her hair undone, eyes red from dancing and crying all at once. She took his hand gently. "I went, Samuel, just like you wanted." His lips curled faintly, pride written in the small strength he had left. "Knew you would, kid," he whispered. Tears streaked down her cheeks, but she refused to look away. "I wasn't alone. They were all there. 100 of them. For me. For you." Samuel's eyes closed, but a smile lingered. The soldier in him had fought his last battle. The man in him had given his last gift. Emily laid her head against his arm, the machines echoing softly, and whispered, "Rest now. I'll carry it from here." Outside, engines waited, riders standing in silence, knowing instinctively that a brother was nearing his final ride. The funeral was unlike anything Millhaven had ever seen. Rows of motorcycles stretched down the street, chrome glinting beneath a cloudless sky. Veterans in faded uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder with bikers in leather, united not by appearance but by respect. Emily walked behind the casket, her hand clutching the folded flag that once lay on Samuel's chest. Townsfolk lined the sidewalks, some bowing heads, others holding children close. For once, no one mocked, no one whispered. Samuel Callahan, the quiet man with a limp, was seen for who he truly was. A protector, a hero, a guardian of those who had none. The pastor spoke of sacrifice, of ordinary men who lived extraordinary truths. But Emily didn't need words. She only needed the sound of engines revving low, like thunder rolling beneath her feet. At the graveside, Bear placed his vest over the coffin for a moment, head bowed. "Ride easy, brother," he muttered. Emily pressed the flag to her chest, her tears falling like rain over folded stars. Weeks passed, but the sound of that day lingered. Emily returned to school, her shoulders straighter, her voice stronger. Whispers no longer pierced her. Instead, some classmates stopped her in the hall to say, "I'm sorry," or "You were brave." She didn't need their apologies. She had found her place, not in fitting in, but in standing tall. Bear and the bikers checked in often, engines roaring outside her house like guardians announcing themselves. Emily's mother, once wary, now welcomed them with coffee and pie. In quiet moments, Emily wrote letters to Samuel, slipping them into the cedar chest with her dress. She told him about college applications, about dreams of becoming a nurse, about learning to dance without fear. She ended each letter with the same line, "Dance when the music plays." Samuel's words had become her compass, pointing her toward a future where courage was louder than fear. His sacrifice hadn't ended her story. It had set it free. On the anniversary of Samuel's passing, the bikers gathered once more. Emily stood at the diner, now freshly painted, a plaque on the wall reading, "In honor of Samuel Callahan, soldier, friend, protector." Bear clapped her shoulder. "You ready?" She nodded. Outside, engines lined up, 100 strong once again. Emily climbed onto Bear's Harley, her prom dress long traded for jeans and boots, but her spirit just as radiant. As they rode out, the town paused, watching leather and chrome thunder by. This time Emily didn't feel like the girl people whispered about. She felt like the daughter Samuel had chosen. The convoy roared down the highway, engines merging, with wind, sky, and memory. Emily closed her eyes, whispering into the rushing air, "Thank you, Samuel, for giving me the dance." And in that moment, with the world vibrating around her, she knew he was riding alongside them still, an old soldier who had finally found peace in the family he helped create. Some stories remind us that family isn't always blood, it's who stands beside you when storms come. Samuel gave his last breath to protect Emily, and she carried his spirit into every tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and ring the bell to keep these stories alive.